If you stop people from touching the stove, and there's this cool guy standing there who's just like, no, stoves are the best. I can't believe these corrupt cuck elites are stopping you from touching that stove. Oh, you should get in there. Touch that stove. It's awesome. And we're sitting there going, no, don't do it. Don't do it. The voters have showed that they will be much more resentful of us than they will of the cool guy. And so if your goal is to persuade them, you have to let them touch it. Hello, everyone. It's JVL here with my best friend, Sarah Longwell, publisher of The Bulwark. It's Monday. Got to get up with It's Monday. It's not Friday. And we decided to sit down because we were having a conversation on the telephone, like old people, and decided we should just do this in public the way we do 90% of all of our conversations. And so we're back.
90%, but it is true. We were just on the phone and we were like, we should really just do this because we're going to have the same conversation. The thing that I think is really remarkable is we literally are about to have the same conversation.
Yes.
For public consumption that we were absolutely having privately because it is the same. There is no calibration there.
Nope. This is us.
Yeah.
This is us.
For better or worse, guys.
So, over the weekend, we got some news. We have Elise Stefanik replacing Nikki Haley as ambassador to the UN with Elise Stefanik. I can't tell if that's an upgrade or a downgrade. Thoughts?
Oh, okay. You want me to answer that right now? Downgrade. But, it's like two things that are really terrible. Because honestly, they've done the same. They've had a pretty similar trajectory. Although Nikki Haley is in some ways tougher to stomach because she sometimes does the right thing, right? She sometimes says the true thing. And so we know that there's a good Nikki Haley in there who got eaten by bad Nikki Haley, the Nikki Haley that wants to or that is willing to compromise every value for power, whereas Elise Stefanik similarly willing to compromise her values, but she made a hard pivot at one point from the person she used to be to the new MAGA Elise Stefanik, and so the extent to which we can count on Elise Stefanik to do only what Trump wants is pretty high. At least with Nikki Haley, I think we had the option that sometimes she might buck Trump to do what she knows to be right because her internal compass is actually all right. Whereas Elise Stefanik, I think we could say, has completely subjugated herself to Trump and will never do anything that he doesn't want her to do. That's what I think.
There is I should do this as a mathematical formula at some point because there's a graph for this where somebody who is always terrible is less infuriating than somebody who is 5% of the time good, right? Because somebody who's 5% of the time good is showing you that they know the difference, but that they don't care enough. But then there's some point on that line where it ticks over, and somebody who's good 35% of the time, it's like, okay, that's great. I'll take 35%. We don't need somebody who's with us all the time, although we would like it. We don't need somebody who does the right thing even 50% of the time. Although that would be awesome. But there's that, I don't know where the tipping point is there on utility for goodness.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting thought experiment. Where does it tip over? Where you stop being more infuriating than somebody who's just always terrible and become actually good?
Well, infuriating has to do with our reaction to it versus which is the worst, which gives us the worst outcomes, which is sort of what I wanted to wrestle with the two of us. Because I read your triad on Friday, which you framed as a modest proposal, which I'm glad you did that because at least it had then the patina of, is this satire, is it not?
I'm just asking questions.
Right, you're just asking questions.
Just asking questions. I'm going to do a lot of that in the coming weeks. Just asking questions.
And so I'm pretty firmly in the camp of I know everyone feels rage and anger. And I think since we're all just getting each other to entertain propositions, though, like I have some, I want to have you entertain some propositions too.
I want to hear
because
them.
I think this fundamental question of where we know a lot more than we did in 2016, and about the American people, we know a lot more about Trump, know a lot more about the people that are going to populate his cabinet. You know, there's things that we don't know, but there's a lot we do know, and I think a fundamental question worth wrestling with is what is a harm mitigation strategy? Like what hills do you die on going forward that doesn't lead you to sort of full resistance mode all the time and everything that is exhausting and not particularly useful? And then like what don't you protect people from? Like what do they need to see and get that is like Trump's mandate? That like we're not going to protect, like no one should protect people from Trump's mandate to some degree because people voted for it. They said they wanted it. Okay, so they should get it. And on the other hand, like at what point do you say the cost is too high, either to our institutions or to human beings, that you, I think is from a moral standpoint, should and must intervene? Because I am unwilling to sort of say, let's burn it all down. Let's give the American people exactly what they just asked for.
To be clear, I am unwilling to do that too.
Yeah, okay.
Sort of.
Well, but I think you, like the American people, or I would ask you this. This, I remember the hypothetical proposition I wanted to give you before that I had forgotten, which was this. Let's assume for a second the absolute best about people. And in assuming that, let's assume that what just happened has more to do with people really struggling. Like let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's take the Tom Nichols JVL thing away and say, actually, we are dealing with a bunch of people who could not meet the demands of the higher costs, and that the reason that Trump won. Now, I'll also stipulate, even for this hypothetical, plenty of people in the Trump coalition who make plenty of money and wanted Trump to own the libs, wanted Trump to do the worst he could, wanted Trump to be his chaotic, damaging, slightly entertaining, own my enemies person. Those people are in the coalition. But let's assume the reason he won by a disproportionate amount is this. There's a lot of people who are just not paying attention to politics. They were getting routed by costs. They thought Joe Biden was too old and they were frustrated with him. And they didn't vote affirmatively for Trump and all his like things. They mostly just wanted to figure out how costs are going to go down so that they could live better lives. Okay?
Okay.
Let's assume the best intentions.
I can do that.
If you do that and then maybe aren't consumed by the need for, or in that scenario, do you still feel like, okay, well, then let Trump do his worst and have at everybody? Or is there an element where you're like, I don't know, like where you feel slightly more compassion and a desire to say, this is one election. How do we build for the future? Because I will say I am in that camp. I am in the camp of, so like I'm going to force you into my framework for a second.
Sure.
And say, this happened because for a lot of people, Trump has been normalized simply by virtue of how long he's been around, so that they haven't known anything else. They don't know that there's an alternative Republican Party in there somewhere, right? Trump is just like, okay, this guy's been with us for a long time. And we're going to give him another shot. He's a businessman, whatever. And they wanted to bring costs down. So I'm not trying to punish people. I'm in harm mitigation mode and building for the future mode. So if you accepted those terms, how would you approach the next 4 years?
Boy, it's tough because you're making a calculation about net harm, right? And so if you allow him to do what he will, and it causes a bunch of harm now, but it makes him radically unpopular and enables a more liberal, democratic, normal type person to win from either party in 2028, then that's like one side of the scale. And you balance that out against, well, what happens if you stop a bunch of harms that the voters never give you credit for stopping? Because this is true. Like, voters never give you credit for dogs that didn't bark. And in fact, you then allow him to say, see, I only didn't do X, Y, and Z because these bad people obstructed me. And this allows like J.D. Vance and Stephen Miller to be elected in 2028 with an even bigger mandate, or for Trump to run for a third term, which, by the way, is exactly, just saying, that's a conversation we're going to have over and over and over the next 4 years. He is going to tease the question of a third term over and over and over. He is never going to reject it out of hand. And we are going to just have to wait until 2027, probably, for him to either push forward with it and force a showdown with the Supreme Court or not. So anyway, just buckle up for that, people. And the answer is I don't know how to make that calculus work, right? I don't know how to balance those two things against each other. And I think a lot of it depends on the types of harms. If he proposes doing things which are illegal, he should be opposed, right? Then people on our side should push back against it and try to obstruct it or resist it to the greatest extent possible. Certainly, if he tries to do something which will disproportionately affect the people who voted against him, our people, if I could speak in like grossly tribal ways, then that should be opposed.
How will you know?
Well, I mean, if, for instance, he devises a policy to go after college-educated women in blue states, that's then we understand, right? But on the other hand, if the harm he's proposing is a policy choice which was going to disproportionately affect the people who voted for him, even if, again, they're entirely morally blameless for it, I just like at some point...
Give me an example of what that policy would be. Like...
Tariffs. Right.
Good.
Okay. So tariffs, which are going to drive up the cost of materials, which are going to put real labor force participation pressure on manufacturing jobs here in America. So as a for instance, right, you are a company in Ohio who manufactures widgets, and now it costs a whole lot more to you, and so you're going to have to lay off some people or not do expansion that you were planning. I feel like let him do tariffs.
Okay, so that's your advice. But here's the thing. So we won't have to let him do tariffs.
Right,
like,
he'll just do it.
He can do the tariffs. And so there's no like let him. There's not even a mechanism to stop him. He's going to have all three branches of government.
Yeah.
And also that's like the one thing he can do more or less by himself, right?
A lot of it he can do more or less by himself, I think.
Yeah.
Like the deportations.
So let me ask you this, though.
Or the Ukraine thing. Let's talk about Ukraine and deportations.
Okay, let's.
Right?
Yeah, please.
Because those are good examples. Well,
Go ahead.
Okay, so let's pretend somebody in Congress, some Republican like Lindsey Graham, decides he wants to try to get Trump to push forward an aid package for Ukraine. Mm-hmm. Should Democrats participate in that?
An aid package for Ukraine? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
So this is where you and I would really maybe part ways, which is I think that if Trump decides to do something that we consider to be good, this is different from balls and strikes, but like if his administration is going to do things that we think are net positives, I don't think that we should stand in the way in order to like
Total agreement.
Your hands are up. Hands up.
My hands are no.
Okay.
Total agreement. I'm sorry. When I said that, I was assuming that what it meant was that there would be like three Republicans waging a doomed fight against Trump who did not want to do aid for Ukraine. Okay. And the question was, should Democrats expend political capital by making a big show and trying to because you only get to obstruct so much before voters start tuning you out, right? Mm-hmm. Should Democrats try to die on that hill in a losing fight? Or should they just say, like, we'll vote for a Ukraine aid package, but if this is simply a thing that's not going to happen, we're not going to go to the mattresses on this.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? Like,
if it's doomed. So if it's doomed, that's an interesting question, because if it's possible to get it, so this would be one of mine where it's like, I think that figuring out ways to support the post-World War II order is important because the harm that can be done, right? So it's, for me, a lot of it is like, what can be undone in the future and what has cascading effects that are basically impossible to undo. So like, if Ukraine falls to Putin and Putin says, cool, and America's basically like, yeah, we're abandoning all this stuff. And the next thing, Putin's like, great, Poland, hello, we're coming for you next. Those are costs that to me are high enough that we should do what we can to oppose them. Right? And like, and was the immigration the other one? Because I would sort of...
Yeah, the deportation stuff.
Right.
Is another
so
one.
let's say they start with...
Hey, Sarah, there's more show.
Oh, there is?
Yeah.
Are we still talking? We have more talking?
Yeah, we're still talking. The talking goes on. But that's only for the people who are inside the Velvet Rope, the Bulwark Plus members.
Oh, they got to subscribe.
Yeah. Tell them to subscribe. Tell the people,
You should subscribe,
Sarah.
Guys. Why wouldn't you subscribe? You get all kinds of things. You get some extra me and JVL. You get some extra me and George Conway. You get JVL's Triad. This is one of the best things the Bulwark offers. I read it at least once or twice a week.
Yes. Go and subscribe. We'd love to have you.